Antique clock stood in an antique shop among dusty books and faded paintings, exuding the smell of old wood and mechanical oil. When Thomas saw it, he immediately felt an inexplicable attraction. The case was made of dark wood, richly decorated with carvings, curls, strange symbols, barely distinguishable among the patterns. There were no numbers on the dial, only long, sharp hands, and glass slightly dulled with time. The seller, a thin man with anxious eyes, looked at the clock for a long time before speaking. "Are you sure you want to buy it?" Thomas grinned, not paying attention to his tone. "Of course. It will be a wonderful addition to the living room." The seller ran his tongue over his lips, but said nothing. Thomas did not know that from that moment on, time would begin to flow differently in their house. The clock was hung in the living room. It did not tick like usual. The house was filled with a lifeless silence in which it seemed that the mechanism did not work at all. But when it struck the first time, Thomas flinched. The sound was too loud, metallic, deep. And the strangest thing was that the clock was not quite time. It struck 3 times, but the hands were still at 12. Catherine, his wife, frowned. "Are they broken?" "I don't think so." Thomas ran his fingers over the carving on the case. The wood seemed warm, but he convinced himself that he was just imagining things. A week passed, and everything became even stranger. The clock struck only when the house was quiet, early in the morning when everyone was asleep, late at night when no one was in the living room, and each time a different number of strikes. One day there were 7 when the hands showed 5. The next day, 9 when it was 2. It seemed as if the clock was counting down something of its own. And soon Thomas realized that it was not just telling the time, it was warning. But about what? At first, Thomas did not connect these events. Yes, the clock struck strangely. Yes, they seemed to play by their own rules. But he chalked it up to the age of the mechanism, the design, anything but that. But then Catherine disappeared. It happened early in the morning. Thomas woke to the loud chime of the clock once. He sat bolt upright in bed, his heart pounding. "Cat?" Silence. He walked out into the hallway, looked into the bathroom, the kitchen. The house was empty. No clothes, no phone, no sign that she had ever been there. She was simply gone. Thomas tried calling her, but the number didn't exist. Her photos were gone from the frames. Even her name was gone from her papers. It was as if she had never existed. But he remembered her. He knew she was there. But the clock struck once, and she was gone. The next day, Thomas held on to his sanity with all his might. But then the clock struck twice, and their son, little Oliver, was gone. Thomas woke up, and it was all over again. No trace, no papers, no memories for anyone but him. Everyone looked at him like he was crazy when he asked about Oliver. Only he remembered that he had a son, but the clock had counted down his time, and now he was gone. Thomas did not sleep anymore. He sat in the living room staring at the clock. Strange lines were now appearing on its dark wood, as if someone had scratched names. He recognized them: Catherine, Oliver, and the last line, his own name. He knew that the clock would not stop. It would strike again, and when it struck 3 times, he would be gone forever. Thomas knew that he had no time left. He tried to throw the clock away, but it kept coming back. He broke the glass, but the mechanism continued to work. He tried to burn it, but the wood did not catch fire, and the hands continued to move. They waited for it to strike 3 times. That night he could not sleep. He sat in the chair, his head in his hands, staring at a clock that didn't show the real time. He couldn't remember what day it was. He didn't know how long it had been since Catherine had disappeared, and Oliver. And who else? The list in his memory was fading, filling with silence. But he didn't want to disappear. He didn't want to be next. At 3:12, the clock struck 3 times. The sound echoed through the empty house, filled with something deep, inevitable. Thomas tried to scream, but his voice was no longer his. His body was blurring, becoming a shadow, dissolving into the air like smoke. The walls were fading. The furniture was gone. The photographs were erased. The house was becoming empty. A family had never lived there. They had never existed. In a small antique shop, an elderly salesman straightened the old things on the shelf. Among them stood a wall clock, dark wood, carved patterns. It was waiting for a new owner. Because time must move on.